If you've been enjoying R4E, the Reason for Everything podcast, please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all platforms or wherever you get your podcasts. It's Friday. We'll cut ourselves a little bit of slack here with some technical difficulties. But Brian, welcome to R4E, the Reason for Everything podcast. Really excited for our conversation today. We were just diving into your background, and I'd love to give you a chance to give the audience some context as to who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. So I was a management consultant at Deloitte. Was there for about 6 years, doing growth strategy, kind of the typical stereotypical things you study in business school, right? Like it's like what helping big companies decide what markets to go into, what customers do you target, all that kind of stuff. A lot of fun, loved it, crazy hours, and still enjoyed it. Then COVID hits, right? And all the fun of consulting kind of went out the window. So on the side, I was actually kind of helping founders, right? Because during the day, I would help with growth strategy for these big companies. And I would just take the frameworks and the problems that they had, or the solutions they had to these problems, and turn around and help founders with them, right? Because founders would have similar problems. We're like, I don't know how to do, I don't know, should I enter this market? Should I position myself? All these things that we already had all these battle-tested frameworks for, right? And so it was kind of an aha moment where I would take some things for granted, like some solutions, some tools for granted from consulting, and founders just never heard of it, you know? And so I just kind of felt unfair. So it kind of started to meet more founders, get to know their stories, the more I help them. And had a moment where I realized that the founder life was actually more for me than the consulting life. And so, I mean, I can dive into that moment specifically, but ended up kind of jumping to the other side and helping founders with the same tools and whatnot that I help the big companies with.
I love it. There's so much I want to explore in there, but let me start off with the question that you probably got and get asked all the time. And when I spent time in management consulting, I did as well. And I'm not even kidding when I ask you to share your opinion on what is a management consultant. What do you guys actually do? Because like I said, I had experience myself and I can barely explain it, but would love to hear, in your layman's, how you describe it to the audience. Or like another management consultant, what's going on?
Yeah. Fair question. So I think we're professional problem solvers. That's the best way I think about it, right? And because there's so many different types of consultants. And so I've actually done a wide range of them. So when I first started out, I was doing kind of operating model work, which just means like how do you structure a company? And if you think about say you work for say you work for JP Morgan, right? Or actually, that's not a good example because they do have teams to do this. But say you work for a big company and you don't typically have people who are experts at restructuring companies because it only happens once, right? You don't need to hire people full time to restructure your company. And so instead, you outsource this to consultants who all they do is restructure companies. They go from company to company who have these once in a lifetime experiences, but to them, it's day in, day out. And so you're essentially hiring people to go through these unique experiences that you don't have skill sets for. You're not going to hire full time for because they only happen every once in a while. Whether it's you're buying a company, whether you're restructuring your company, whether you need to send out communication, whether you're launching a new product. Like these are all kind of individual moments, and you bring in experts who've done this at a ton of different companies, know where the body's lying, and help you get it right the first time.
Now, going from that to a fractional CMO, living out of a backpack, two very different things. I see you're wearing your spider gear quarter zip now. You're in Boston. Let's bookmark your, transition from consulting to the nomadic lifestyle for a moment here. Give us a little more context. Did you grow up in the Boston area, or where's home for you? Because I feel like that does a really good job of knowing where someone comes from and a little bit more about, their upbringing kind of helps kind of pave the way for people that are willing to take that leap of faith like you did, which I'm excited to learn more about.
Yeah, definitely. So that's complex too. So I grew up halfway between Boston, but then Ecuador. So my mom's from South America, which is probably why I'm obsessed with moving around and seeing new places. But yeah, my mom's side of the family is from Ecuador. My dad's side is from Boston. So I grew up in the Boston area. And the craziest thing is I've never really had a home. Like after graduating college, I went to work for GE in their bank, and just trip bounced around the country. And after GE, I did Deloitte and lived out of hotels. And so I'm just used to this nomadic lifestyle that when COVID hit, it was kind of confusing to me. And so I went full-time nomad. And now instead of nomading in the US, I nomad in different countries.
Super interesting. And I find it fascinating. I feel like so many people that I talk to, especially in the management consulting space, or consulting broadly, who are, bouncing from hotel to hotel, living out of the suitcase. Yeah. Maybe it's just a society's glass half empty view that a lot of people have nowadays. But it's very rare to hear someone say, I really like that. And I travel a good bit for work myself, and I really enjoy the opportunity. I feel like half of its mindset, half of it can be a little monotonous, but it is nice to be able to, live out of the suitcase, experience cool things, see cool places. I saw you've been to pretty much every major city just through your consulting work. I know you've been to Ecuador 20 plus times, but what was your headspace like at that time? When you're in when you're grinding through it, you're, in the grid of the day to day in consulting, going to the boardrooms, meeting with executives.
Yeah.
How did you stay positive? How did you, last out for 6 years? A lot of my audience is, in the 20 to 30 age range, dealing with these questions right now themselves.
Yeah, totally. So it's different. So at the time, the thing that consulting is very intense, right? The lifestyle is very intense. And so the type of person who tends to do consulting is very cookie cutter, right? They tend to be obsessive overachievers with really quirky, unique interests, but at the same time, outgoing and fun, right? And so because of that, you're a unique person in your own city or at home, but you're not so unique when you go on the projects because everyone around you is that kind of way. And so what I found myself doing, right or wrong, most people I'd actually met didn't do this, was I became best friends with everyone on my projects. My girlfriend ended up being a consultant. And so the fact that my girlfriend was a consultant, my friends were all consultants, and then also we have this perk called alternative travel, which is basically, let's say you're working in, I don't know, I live in Boston, I work in LA. The client has to pay on the weekends to fly you back to Boston and then Monday fly you back to LA. Well, they don't care if you use that to go back to Boston or you use it to go to Cartagena. And so I had essentially this ability to fly wherever I want at the end for the weekends. And who else has this ability? Other consultants. So it became almost too convenient to just call up your consulting friends and say you want to meet in a certain city. Call my girlfriend, call consulting friends, everyone meets up, you have a blast for the weekend and then go back. So it was kind of addicting, I'd say. Super fast-paced lifestyle. And so I got hooked and I wanted it for life, actually. I thought I was going to be a partner, but ended up deciding not to and came to the side of the fence.
I may cut this out, but I think there might be a business model there about, having those alternative weekends as like a, hey, we're getting a crew of consultants together in this city on this alternative weekend for this event. Or basically, there could be something there, but nonetheless, you bring up a good point about your transition. You thought you were going to go to stay on the partner track, and you end up, jumping into into your own venture. At what point in your consulting journey were you starting to kind of have these thoughts about, maybe I can do this on the side. Maybe I can start advising startups. What startups were you talking to at that time? You were in your 20s, I presume, at that point. Who's leaning on what, someone in their age range or younger to give them expertise on the whole digital marketing landscape?
Yeah. So it's almost less. The age thing didn't really hit me that much because in consulting, as you know, you're in the boardrooms with these other executives at such a young age, and so the experiences that you're having are wild at right when you're out of college, right? And so the fact that you have access to these people, but then on top of that, I'd say I've never not worked 90, 100-hour weeks, and the speed that you're supposed to work at is if you're not working, the rule of thumb was if you leave the projects, you need to find 3 clients to replace you, meaning you should be working at 3 times the speed of the average person. So if you're working at 3 times the speed for essentially twice the hours, sitting in boardrooms with the most experienced people in the company, you have this wild experience that when you just hop on the phone and start explaining your mindset, it just kind of clicks. And so age was never really a problem, and once we got on the phone and started talking.
Interesting. And then at what point, you're getting this amazing experience. It's almost a bit of time arbitrage. You hear, all of these Instagram influencers talk about, I have like 48 hours in a day because of how efficient I am with my time. And there is something to be said about that. And similar to what you're saying, if you're working, double, triple the amount of hours as someone else is in a given week, you're naturally going to, gain that experience just from being there. But at what point were you starting to say, hey, I have an opportunity to branch off and do my own thing?
Pretty late actually. So toward the end, because I thought I was gonna be a partner. Right? I loved it. I loved the lifestyle. I loved the pressure. It was a pressure cooker, right? But I loved it, right? I'm an athlete. I played rugby growing up, and so it just felt like a continuation of sports, But I had a series of events, and let's get into it. So when I started, so I was at Deloitte. And I was pretty set on the partner track. But if I want to be a partner, I want to be a partner at McKinsey, Bain, or BCG. That was my headset. Like if I'm in consulting for the long haul, I want to get McKinsey, Bain, BCG, and be a partner there. So I started looking at business school because you essentially need business school to make that pivot. And so I had a moment where I went to go to Ross, which is Michigan's business school. And I was sitting there, and just by complete coincidence, the dean comes in. The topics he chose to talk about, right? He was like, "Michigan's amazing. You get to do this. You get to do that. You get to do this." And he listed off like 4 things you get to do, right? And by complete coincidence, all 4 of those things were projects I had done at Deloitte, right? So I was just sitting there looking around, like, am I the only one who's already had this experience? And so now I'm paying this person to get this experience. And I'd always heard that you do business school for the people, not necessarily the knowledge. And that was a moment where I just kind of sat there and was thinking for a bit. I was like, okay, well, if I've already done this, I already know these things. Now, obviously, there's so much I would learn in business school. It just, by complete coincidence, they chose the few topics I already covered. But it was a bit of like a startling moment where I started questioning it. And up to that point, I never questioned it before. Then I started working with founders on the side, just through a friend. So a friend of mine is a banker who has a bunch of founders as clients, and they would have problems with their growth. And so just like as a friend, he was like, "Hey, like, can you just talk to this guy? Just give him some advice." And started to kind of learn the problems that founders are going through, and realize how much my frameworks that I was learning could really help them. Like I can't describe to you how much gratitude they had when I would just share these frameworks that I took for granted, right? That we just did day in and day out, and that would just solve their problems. And so the kind of the personification of when you're working with a big company, you're helping executives keep their job, right? And they can get another one. It's not as high stakes. I mean, it's high stakes in the scheme of everything, but not to the individual, right? But when you're working with a founder, it's their life, it's their baby. There's passion. You're helping the individual, you're helping the person, and the gratitude they feel is incredible. So I had a few of those calls. And then my biggest so I started questioning from business school, started questioning whether I should do the partner path, working with founders, and started to realize how valuable the lessons really were. And then the straw that broke the camel's back, the final aha, let's do this, was I was on a project, and it was a massive project. I think it was like 200 million in revenue or something like that, like a big project. And they didn't have any strategists. And so I was the only strategist on the project by just complete coincidence who was available. And long story short, by the end of the project, the partner came and said, "Wow, congrats. Thank you, Brian. Thanks for all you've done. You've saved the project." And so and then he handed me a gift card, right? Like a $50 gift card, right?
Right.
And so in my head, I'm like, I created X amount in value, and I got a gift card. Imagine if I could get a % of the value I created. And so that was the big aha moment, where it was a combination of I knew how much value I could create. I wanted to get a % of that value I created, and I wanted to help people.
I love it. Now, I mean, I've had similar thoughts in the past, and let's talk mechanically for a second. So you get that gift card, and you start having these thoughts. That's your aha moment.
Yeah.
What was the turnaround time from gift card receipt to, trying to go after, or, did you pursue that first client, the friend who was the banker who had, the startups, or what was that like? And at what point were you like, all right, trying to start to put together, some of the pieces there?
Yeah, turnaround time was a few hours, I would say,
No
actually.
way. Okay.
I had a quick trigger finger. So I ended up, I don't talk about this too often, but I ended up trying to build a fintech that would essentially help founders, like essentially take what I did and put it into an app, right? At the time, I didn't know better. Like that was my first startup. I was trying to figure out how to build a startup. And so I was like, okay, let's do this. And so I started trying to take my knowledge and productize it, put it into an app and share it with founders, basically so they don't get taken advantage of, right? That ended up failing. And one of the one of the drivers, a bunch of them, but one of the drivers for it was distribution, right? Like the actual, like I'd started kind of getting into digital marketing a little more around that time. And to backtrack, remember when I told you what management consulting is, right? I actually explained the ops side of it, not what I do. So I did a little bit of that ops because it was just easier to explain. But what I focused on was growth strategy, right? And that's which market should you enter, which customer should you target, which channels should you go after, how do you create a competitive advantage, that kind of stuff. And so I worked with digital marketing from like a choosing which channels to go into perspective, but not from like a tactical, like here's how you grow your business using SEO, right? I think I had to Google what the acronym was. And so when I was building my own thing, that's when I started actually learning what SEO was, learning how ads work, all that kind of stuff. Whereas before in consulting, I never actually had to run the ads. I would decide which markets to run the ads in,
Yeah. And then you'd hand that to their marketing team and have them run with it.
Exactly. And so that's kind of when I realized, I need control. I need to figure out how to do this marketing thing. Like I know marketing, but I don't know the tactics of digital marketing as much. And so what happened was, essentially I knew the strategy, not the tactics. And so I started building these tactics myself, right? I was like, okay, I'm going to start writing on Twitter, right? Obsessively study copywriting, obsessively study storytelling, socials, how to generate leads using socials, all that kind of stuff for myself. And ended up building my Twitter following to about 41,000 or 42,000, LinkedIn to 45,000, I believe, something like that. But then also like creating the funnels behind the socials to actually generate the income for the business after that, right? But getting to that point was definitely a huge bigger learning curve than I thought. But now I'm at the point where I show, and that's what I do in my CMO business, is a combination of the strategy stuff I did at Deloitte and the digital marketing stuff I did for myself. And when business owners ask their questions, I show them the strategy, and then I pull up my screen and show them actually the tactics of literally what I've done myself and steal the systems. So that's I think the magic combination of those two worlds.
Yeah. And you talk about in a lot of your newsletters and tweets about having skin in the game. And I think this is a pretty common phrase, right? You hear man of the arena, or, actually just building something. And I feel like it's a huge jumping off point for a lot of creators or a lot of entrepreneurs, is actually just putting pen to paper and making it happen. So you get that gift card, you have that fast turnaround time, trigger finger to, start getting get something going. At what point did that, hustle hobby learning SEO copyright turn into, hey, this is something I'm gonna quit my job for? Were you spreadsheets up, balancing to see, hey, how much do I need to be making with my consulting work or services work on the side to get out of the consulting gig? Or what did that look like for you?
Yeah, this is probably where I recommend people do as I say, not as I did. Because what I did on my end, I had a savings goal actually more than a revenue goal.
Interesting.
And so I basically said, to me, money right now to me is runway, right? Like I know my burn rate, I know the income I have basically tells me how. I imagine the startup as an airplane, and it's going down the runway and it's gonna take off, right? It has, luckily at this point, but back in the day, it's gonna take off just a matter of how much runway do I have. And so I did math in my head, and I was like, there's no way that I can't be successful with this much runway, right? And so I did a combination of building on the revenue side, but also I kind of focused on savings from Deloitte. Like I still kind of worked on the side. I worked in consulting, and then on the side kind of built my own thing. But the reason that I wasn't revenue based was because I was actually more focused on products and services. So the extra part that I didn't mention in kind of the story was I was obsessed with travel, and I had this like insatiable curiosity to see what the rest of the world is like. Like I'd never been east of Budapest, and so I live in this bubble in the U.S. and I have no idea what Asia's like, right? How do business owners think in Vietnam, right? I don't know. And I'm just insatiably curious. And I thought, okay, if I build product, I can continue to build the product from Asia. If I build a service, I can't hop on the call from Vietnam, right? To choose one. So I got to a savings point and said, okay, I'm happy with that. I'm going to continue building. I'm going to build it from Asia. And so, I hit my savings goal, hopped on the plane, and kept building product from Southeast Asia.
The context is terrific. I know in one of your newsletters, I guess it was right before Thanksgiving, you built out one that outlined a little bit more about your backstory. So I'll be sure to plug that in the show notes. And helpful context. Now let's talk about where you are today and the business today. So you're building this product. What does that look like today? And what does your job look like today? I know you were able to travel Asia for a while. Well, get us up to speed in terms of you leave Deloitte, you're starting this business. Where are you today?
Yep. So the business is very different. It's reasonably different from what it was in Asia, right? So, and I think I referenced this a little bit in that newsletter you were talking about, was finding your position. I believe, and I'm biased because that's what I did in consulting, but positioning is everything. It is, and let me describe positioning for a second. What is positioning? Positioning is the intersection of who you're targeting, what their pain is, and how you solve that pain better than anyone, right? And then once you have the unique combination of the three things, how do you take that positioning and message it using words that resonate with the customer, right? Because if you can have the best positioning in the world, but if you use the wrong words, it doesn't resonate. And so I basically just tested out a bunch of different positioning theories on how can I take the solutions and frameworks I have from consulting and bring them to small business owners, right? So there's a ton of stuff I'm kind of thinking through is which type of business owners care about this the most, right? Who is the biggest pain? Which pain specifically do I want to solve? What format do I want to solve it in? Like all those questions that I kind of kept targeting. Right. And so I tried big business, I tried early stage startup, I tried in the middle, I tried different problems. And so I just kept iterating. And then it was all good, right? I was able to get customers, but it wasn't what you hear, that typical idea of product market fit, where like, how before product market fit, you're like shoving a boulder up a hill, right? And then after product market fit, you've like gone over that hill and then you're chasing the boulder, right? I was never chasing that boulder. I was kept pushing it. And then fast forward, I don't know, eventually, I forget, but I eventually found the magic combination of positioning, offer, and words that made me chase the boulder, right? And the funny part is, I was always doing strategy marketing, right? I was always playing at the intersection of helping you build your strategy and execute your marketing tactics. And so the question I had was, for who, in what way, so that I can, do that better than anyone.
Super interesting. And then that's where you're at today with Outlier Growth. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So I essentially found a positioning that worked, and it was the difference between when you find the positioning that hits product market fit or service market fit in this case and not is night and day. Like it went from me tweeting or LinkedIn post or newsletter to kind of fill customers to the point where I considered stopping turning off my lead magnet, shutting down the calendar because I just couldn't keep up. And the difference is huge.
Yeah.
And happy to jam on any part of that, because there's a ton to unpack there.
Yeah. So again, there's just, you're branching off from working at one of the biggest institutions in the world, being Deloitte, to running your own business, wearing a lot of different hats. I just had a guest on, Tiffany Human, who talks about, wearing the CEO hat while also trying to be the machine behind the machine. And so you're doing a lot of different things. What was that like for you in early days as a startup founder, entrepreneur? There's so many similarities with what you were doing in your previous role in terms of the actual delivery, but day to day was probably extremely different for multiple reasons, including not the kind of lack of structure and, just the crazy difference. So what was that like for you? What was your headspace like at that time as a, 20 some odd year old startup founder?
So definitely hard from a perspective of kind of trying to figure out which task should you be working on that moves the needle the most, right? I think the biggest changes from consulting to now is, if you don't do something, if you don't push on your business, the default is reverse, not neutral, right?
Ooh, interesting.
So it's only you, and so you have to figure out what can you do to move the needle, and what's a distraction, and also like what distractions do you just enjoy and gives you energy and you want to go for. So it was challenging figuring that out.
What were the distractions for you? Maybe the good and the bad, and just to tee it up for me, like going in and making call it Instagram Reels right now seems to be a time suck, and I don't necessarily recognize ROI from it. I'm not seeing a ton of new subscribers across platforms because I had a really big reel in relative terms, of course. On the other hand, I see a distraction where I make my thumbnails. I really like to do that. It's a totally new task, and there's definitely I could go pay someone on Fiverr to do it for pretty cheap, and also a really probably higher quality tool, but I like to do it and I feel like I'm getting better at it. So that's an example for me of distractions, good versus bad, but I'd love to hear kind of where where it was at for you at that stage of your business.
Yeah, well, let's dive into your thumbnail example, right? Because for example, I'm starting YouTube. I started YouTube last week.
Yeah.
And I'm editing my own videos, and my friends think I'm crazy, right? And the reason I'm editing my own videos, just like you're editing, like creating your own thumbnails, yeah, we could outsource it. But if we're in this for the long haul, and that's like a core part of our business, we have to understand it. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot about the difference between a time investment and a time expense. And so for your thumbnail example, and for me, video editing is a time investment, right? Yeah, it sucks. Yeah, there's not a ton. Actually, there's a high ROI there, but yeah, you could outsource it. But if you outsource it and it's not great, how do you know, right? Like the best way to know is by making the best thumbnail, the thumbnail you're the most proud of, and you spent 2 weeks on, and it's all you thought about. You couldn't sleep at night because you were working on this thumbnail, thinking about this thumbnail, and tweaking it, adjusting it, and then posting it to just have no one engage with it, right? Nothing teaches you what works more than that. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've like posted a tweet or a thread that I was so proud of, and I was just in my head, like, this is gonna go viral, this is gonna go viral, and worse, it did just crickets, right? And then for the next 2 days straight, it's all I can think about. Like, what was it? How can I do it differently? And I'm pulling out the books and studying, like, how do I change my copy? All that kind of stuff. Same goes for funnels, right? Like, if you have a great piece of content, but nobody goes through to buy your product or sign up for your newsletter or whatever that is, there's nothing better than having a failed funnel, right?
Yeah.
Because your next one's going to be so much better.
100%. And it's fascinating where I can't remember who tweeted it, but it's every single time. This guy said every single time I write a tweet that I think is going to be an absolute banger and have a ton of impressions, it's usually one that flops, and the ones that I think are just throwaway ideas or comments that I want to put on there are the ones that end up blowing up, and it's this weird lack there or inverse correlation that's super fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, especially on my end, right? I have never not thought, it's a weird way to say it, but I've never not thought that that a Twitter thread, geez, there's too many negatives in the sense. But anyway, everything I post on Twitter, I assume will go viral, right? Or I wouldn't have posted it. Sure, yeah, there's like thought pieces, but I do tend to do threads. And so if I write a thread I don't think it's going to go viral, well, I'll sit on it and just think about and find inspiration to write the one that does. And spoiler alert, only what, 4% of my content goes viral? 5%? I'm making it up. I have no idea. But
Right.
so there's a huge disconnect between what I think reality is and what reality actually is. And the best way to get closer to understanding reality is to get punched in the face. Right? Like,
Yep.
you get kicked in the, you think it's amazing and you get kicked in the teeth, and then all you think about is what did you do wrong and how can you do it better?
Let's talk about those mediums for a second, because you obviously have a strong following on Twitter, on LinkedIn. You're building your and your newsletter as well. Like you mentioned, you're getting your YouTube off the ground. How do you balance, putting out quality content across platforms? Obviously, there's different content calendars and things to that effect, but how are you thinking about allocating your time, managing your time in terms of just, content creation on top of your actual day job for, revenue generation, maybe taking outside of Twitter now or X now paying people, but where's your head at around all of that?
Yeah. So I try to have it all flow together as I can. And so what I mean by that is, for example, I I'm I had a vision yesterday of what a YouTube video I want to make is, right? And so instead of creating this, I take the script, but I write it as a newsletter issue. So right now I'm writing a newsletter issue that is going to be the script for my YouTube video next week. And so I try to double dip as much as I can. It doesn't always work. What I tried to do at one point was to create a ChatGPT prompt that would take my newsletter and turn it into a LinkedIn post. But I haven't been able to crack that quite yet. So I'm trying as much as I can.
I've messed around with that. It's getting there. I don't think it's perfect yet, but I think we'll get there here in the next couple. Maybe ChatGPT 5 will have it for us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my LinkedIn strategy is very different. I think the newsletter and YouTube is pretty tied together, which I say that I'm like a week into YouTube. But my LinkedIn strategy has been completely different because I've created kind of a whole lead gen system that works. Like I don't understand how it works entirely. And the reason I say it is because if I did the same thing on Twitter, it just wouldn't work. So what I mean by that is on Twitter, my content is very tactical, or tries to be at least. Or it's very like, it's either a story about how you grow your business, or it's my own story about how do you, I don't know, how do you build a strategy? How do you do marketing? That kind of stuff. And what I've found is the more tactical it is, the more newsletter subscribers I get, the more people buy, that kind of stuff. On LinkedIn, I've had CEOs reach out to me to do marketing when I posted 13 quotes from Richard Branson, right? And that kind of content, just sure, it might go a little viral on Twitter, but nobody's going to reach out to you because it's too general to actually understand how I think. And so I think the difference with LinkedIn and why that works is your resume is there. LinkedIn is your resume. And so I just need to get the attention. So if I get, I don't know, 10 quotes from Richard Branson and a couple 100,000 people see it, well, 5 to 10% of them are going to look at my profile, and then they'll look at it, they see the background and go, okay, this guy's legit. And then they reach out.
Yeah.
Whereas on Twitter, you don't have your resume. And so you have to kind of persuade your competence through your content. And so it works a lot better on LinkedIn. And so that way I don't have to spend as much time on it. So I spend probably less time on LinkedIn. Right now, because I'm just learning YouTube, there's so much to learn. I'm spending most of my time on YouTube.
Super interesting. Now, in terms of where you're at as a founder, you are living nomadic. You're out of your backpack and suitcases. You were able to travel to a ton of different countries in Asia last year. I know you have plans to travel to South America next year, probably popping into Ecuador to visit family, I assume. But what's on your, I guess, do you vision board, and do you build out plans and goals as a business owner and personally? And if so, what's on that for 2024?
Oh, interesting. You mean like lifestyle? You mean revenue, like business?
Yeah. For the business and personal, like you're juggling a lot, wearing a bunch of different hats. Maybe as with your CEO hat on, what are you thinking about? How are you thinking about the business in the new year? And then personally, what do you have goals for in the new year as well?
Yeah. So business wise, I'm building a lot of different things, and so trying to figure out how to describe it all at once. But the I'm building everything so it all comes together, right? My goal, I hate this word, but I'm going to use it. Synergies, right? I think about synergies across each line of my business, right?
That's a Deloitte consultant in you right there.
Yeah, exactly. But the moral of the story is if I put an hour of effort into something, I want it to ripple through as many things as possible.
Hmm.
And so in my fractional CMO business, um, um, if I can pull founders in my ecosystem with a marketing pain or a growth pain that I can solve with marketing, we'll have a bunch of different tools to solve it. And so my content pulls people into this ecosystem where I have a bunch of different solutions that people can grab. So, for example, if you're a bigger business, I have hands-on fractional CMO work, right? If you're a smaller business and you can't, I'd say you're not ready for the hands-on stuff. Well, I'm building out guides to kind of be like a handheld, like take it kind of thing, like do it yourself kind of approach.
Yeah.
If you want it done for you, not quite fractional CMO, in between, well, I'm building a portfolio of agencies or partnerships with agencies where I can kind of hand people off to quality agencies, right? So that ecosystem of things is all made better by my content. And so if I can crush YouTube, let's say, um, it drives a ton of traffic into my newsletter, and from my newsletter it spits out, do you need this here? Do you need this here? Do you need this here? So my focus is building out that whole ecosystem, right? Building each node out so that the businesses are kind of now self-running, and then build a pipeline out so that I get a ton of traffic coming in. YouTube's the most exciting to me right now through YouTube, and I can tell you why in a sec too.
Yeah, let's go. What's exciting about YouTube?
Trust. So one of the challenges, so I am a text-based creator right now, right? So Twitter, LinkedIn, they don't really see your face, they don't hear your voice, they don't spend much time with you. They just see your tweets or your LinkedIn posts. In order to get the sale, you need to build enough trust with the customer. Right. So if you just see one of my posts, you don't know who I am, you don't know how I think, you don't know why should you believe me. I have to go through all those jumps. Right. I was listening to a podcast yesterday. This guy said, on average, he finds that the customer needs to spend an hour and a half with him on YouTube before they're trusted enough to buy. Right. But let's use that hour and a half. I don't know if that hour and a half is true, but let's use it for a second.
Yeah.
How do you create that on Twitter? Right. How do you create that on LinkedIn?
Right.
You can. It's just really hard, right? It's doable. Justin Walsh has done it. On Twitter, Dickie Bush has done it. Like, I can name people who've done it. George 10 has done it. But the list is small.
Yeah.
And so I'm talking like 5 to 7 people big, right? And I know hundreds of creators. So let's assume for a second that we're not going to be in the 5 to 7 creators who can pull it off. I want to build trust. And I think long form content is the best way to do that, right? And so that's either podcast, which is really hard to grow. Podcast is the hardest thing to grow, but has the highest retention rate. Or YouTube. And I think for me, YouTube is the most exciting. They can see you, they can hear you. And if you have a 10-minute video and you can get your attention up for most of it, it's a really fast way to build trust. And so people are much more likely to buy than from Twitter and LinkedIn.
What I find interesting is you're building all of this on the side, and for a lot of content creators, not only, or I guess not even content creators, I'm trying to think the bucket I'd put you into, but you're creating this content and then also selling a product as well.
Yeah.
So not only are you having to constantly build, refine, craft your content, but you're also having to constantly build, you're building out this funnel through your content, and then you have to execute on the closed and converted.
Yes. Yep.
And it's almost like 2 jobs at once. And so I guess at this point, is it just you and fractional CMO, or are there other people in the business? How are you able to allocate 24 hours in a day to do both the content side of it and the product creation side of it?
that's where the consulting helps, where it's 3x speed, working crazy hours. I still do it. Like I still work as fast as I can. It's definitely that whole the saying where people say you leave your 9 to 5 to work 24 hours or whatever it is. I forget what it's. But I love it. It's awesome. It's amazing. You get to choose your own journey, more control, that kind of stuff. But anyway, your question was how do I balance it, how do I pull it off? Well, I have help. I do have a team who helps do my content.
Nice.
But it really ends up, because I am a bit of a perfectionist, so I end up rewriting everything myself.
Yeah.
But it's more content research, ideas, managing my calendar. So I have people who text me if I forgot something. I wake up to a content calendar and I go through and choose the topics I think are the best, rewrite them, all that kind of stuff. Then on the client service side, it's a blend, right? Because my mission is to help as many people as possible. And I believe you can't help that many people one-on-one. And so I'm trying to help people at scale, but at the same time, I need to help individuals to get to hear their pains and all that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to balance that. The way I'm doing it is I've been increasing my prices over time. And so I can kind of handle essentially fewer and fewer hours to then take the learnings from that and apply it to newsletter, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc.
Flywheel.
So combination of price strategy, like obsessive time management, and I don't know, working through it.
One of the things I would hear a lot when I was getting started in consulting was about creating a bulletproof morning routine where no matter where you wake up in the world on a given day, you have your set morning routine ready to go so that, and this is before all of the biohacking, red light therapy, early morning sun exposure, sauna, cold plunge, right? So taking all that out of the picture, for someone like yourself who's nomadic, traveling all around the world, constantly, dealing with jet lag and waking up in new places with who knows what resources from a exercise, gym, food perspective. What is your day-to-day like from a routine perspective? Do you have a really kind of, you said you're very diligent about your management, time management. Do you have a set routine you do every single day? From 7 to 9 you're working on tweets, from 9 to 10 you're working on LinkedIn posts. What does that look like for you pragmatically today? Obviously, nuance of each day is different, fires you have to put out, what have you, but what's a typical day look like for you and your nomadic lifestyle?
Yeah. So I write the best in the morning. Like my creative juices, actually not even creative, I would actually argue my analytical juices are best when I first wake up to the moment I put food in my mouth for lunch, right? So I do my best to do all my content creation from the moment I wake up to lunch. And I also do my best to schedule any meetings after lunch, because that's when I think the most creatively and can be, I don't know, more charismatic, less psychotic, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But like mixing that with your travel, I think the thing with travel for me has been I travel so much that the change of pace has become the norm. So I know when I land in a new city, first thing I do is I walk around the Airbnb to find the nearest grocery store, go to the convenience store, get all my stuff set up, and then get lost a little bit so I know the area, right? Then kind of day to day, my hours are from the moment I wake up, hit a coffee shop or kind of work from the house until I eat lunch, and then go use lunchtime, use break times to explore the different cities. And then do the client work in the afternoon, and then evenings kind of do more creative research and learning and prep for the content creation the next day.
Is there anyone that you're looking up to, or that's a guiding light in this journey for you as another creator person in this landscape that you kind of see as a beacon for you in your day to day?
It depends, because I think every creator is so different, right? Every creator has strengths in. Every creator has their very unique strengths that sometimes I need help with, right? So just to take one example, right? There's George 10, copywriter on Twitter, who is by far the best I've seen, who isn't Justin Welsh or, I don't know, maybe Dickie Bush ish, at creating community, right? Making people obsessed with the community around them. So I actually flew to Spain to hang out with him and spend 2 weeks with him to learn how does he build such an engaged community, right? And I wrote a newsletter issue. It was funny when I was with George. We went to Starbucks, and I said, George, like, you better than anyone. Like, you could sneeze on Twitter and you'd have 100 people there to say bless you, right? So he laughs, he smirks, he's like, hold my coffee, and he just goes to Twitter, types sneeze, right? And so he smirks and he gets boom, 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 all this engagement, and then at the end, someone goes, "Where do I go to buy your course?" so, so when you get to that level where you can sneeze on Twitter and sell a course, like, that's how you know you've got great engagement, great community. He's amazing at that, and other things I go to other people for. And so to answer your question, it's almost like I think through what are the different traits that I have, values that I want, and then who are the best at those individual things, and then spend time with those people to learn those individual things, and then mold myself and mold who I want to be.
Crazy example there about the sneeze. How about on the YouTube landscape? Who are you? Who would you go fly out to pick their brain on for 2 weeks?
That's a tough one, right? The reason I say it's tough is, so I'll quote Hormozy for a sec. So he has this one quote where it's, when you start off, it's kind of this, the word lonely is a little aggressive here, but I'm going to use it. It's this lonely chapter where you don't have the results yet to hang out with the people you think you should be hanging out with, basically, right? And so it's a really humbling experience, because I have 40,000 on Twitter, 40,000 on LinkedIn, and 33 on YouTube, right? And so any creator who's just as psychotic as I am on these other platforms is probably not ready yet to have a conversation with them, right? And so, which I want to earn it, right? I don't want to like use my brand on other platforms to get in. Like, I want to earn this. So I'm focused on me for the next 5 to 10 videos, and then I'll maybe lean on my brand on other platforms a bit to try to get on their radar. But that's a long way of saying for YouTube, I don't have the answer yet. I have the answers for LinkedIn and Twitter. I don't have it for YouTube.
Fair enough. I'll circle back with you on that, because that was a very consultant answer. But I want to know who that target combo would be down the road. As we're rounding out here, I guess this will air in 2024. What are you hoping to do with your business, and how can people keep up to date with Brian and all things fractional CMO? I'll be sure to plug your socials and newsletter in the show notes. But how would you round out here? Any parting pieces of wisdom for my audience?
Parting pieces of wisdom. Yeah, so I assume it seems like your audience is more kind of people who want to take the entrepreneurship journey, right? So first off, don't do what I did. I think the best advice I have is to kind of build alongside your day job, for sure. But then also, what I think most people do wrong is what you were talking about before, in terms of outsourcing or not focusing on the core skills, right? So for YouTube, for example, that's thumbnails and editing, right? Yes, you should outsource it, but not until you've learned it. And so for Twitter and LinkedIn, that's copywriting. And so I can't tell you the number of people who I know who are trying to build on, say, LinkedIn, but they've never studied copywriting. They've never studied storytelling. And how can you expect to drive a ton of customers using a platform that thrives on copywriting and storytelling, right? So I think it's a bit of build while you're still working, so you have something to jump to. But then also, if you're using a platform to drive, I mean, everyone's using some platform, whether it's Google Ads, whether it's SEO, whether it's socials, but figure out what the core competency is of that platform. For text-based, it's copywriting and storytelling. For YouTube, there's others, all that kind of stuff. And get good at that, right? Because I think most people kind of don't think about the core skills needed to grow on a platform, and then get surprised when they're not growing.
Who would have thought that a pat on the back and a gift card from your boss would get you to where you are today? And I'm really excited to see where you continue to grow your business, and really appreciative of your time. Like I said, I'll plug your socials in the show notes, but for anyone listening still, where can they find you on LinkedIn, Twitter? What's the best place to get in touch with you and learn more?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say on all platforms, my name is Brian F. O'Connor, because I can't compete with, when you type in Brian O'Connor on Google, it's Fast and the Furious, right? I can't compete with Fast and the Furious for SEO. But yeah, Brian.
Not yet.
Not yet. But yeah, find me on LinkedIn, find me on YouTube. It's Brian, Brin, F as in Fernando, which is my middle name, O'Connor.
Beautiful. Well, Brian, thanks again for your time, and excited to stay in touch, man.